Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Negotiation. As we alluded to last week, we wanted to get two of our favorite guests who are super connected and very knowledgeable on the topic of U.S.-China relations back on the show and do a quick autopsy on the last 4 years of the Trump administration's impact on the U.S.-China relationship, and then take a look forward at what the Biden administration's relationship might look like now that we have a month or so of data to work with to try and make some of these predictions. Last week, we released the episode with Anne Stephenson Yang, and this week, our conversation is with James McGregor. And just like last week, we take most of the same talking points to Jim to get his thoughts on who the players were and will be, what happened with regards to the tariff war and where that might go next, and some discussion around the security and technology race going forward, among a few other sound bites that only our buddy James can provide. Enjoy.
Biden's got a very strong human rights record, and trade is going to be very interesting to watch because the U.S. Trade Representative, Catherine Tai, is Taiwanese American, has Mandarin. She used to be an enforcement attorney at USTR, and then she's been on the Ways and Means Committee staff, heading up the trade work. She knows what she's doing. Biden's trade policy is about creating jobs in the United States.
Home to over 4 billion people, the Asia-Pacific region boasts one of the most powerful consumer markets on the planet. Not only is it home to half the world's under 30 population, but it's also home to more than half the world's internet users. It's a market no globally minded brand should ignore, but entering markets like China is no easy task. Just ask the likes of Microsoft, Google, Uber, and Facebook. Times are changing, and with the right partners, doors are slowly opening as more and more companies find success expanding into the markets of the Middle Kingdom. I myself spent 8 years in China, mostly as a venture capitalist, helping early-stage tech companies enter the Asia-Pacific market successfully. This show is dedicated to uncovering and examining successful China entry and growth strategies by interviewing the people behind those success stories. My name is Todd Embley, and welcome to The Negotiation, brought to you by WPIC Marketing and Technologies.
Jim, welcome back to the show, my friend. It's good to have you.
Oh, happy to be here.
Let's start off with a quick look back at the overall successes and failures, like we did with Anne, of the Trump administration as it relates to U.S.-China policy.
Well, the success would be they changed the conversation on China globally. There was a pushback coming even if Hillary had been elected because the business community was exhausted with China, and so was much of the world's diplomatic community because China had just overreached and gone too far. And so there was time for a pushback. And so Trump did shake things up, and he's changed the conversation with China kind of forever, I guess. His successes, my God, I mean, it was such a shambolic performance in the inconsistent emotional tweeting, the saying that he loves Xi Jinping, but then going off in all kinds of directions, whether it's WeChat or TikTok or God knows what. I would guess one success would be that he's the first one to bring a cost to China's activities in Xinjiang. Through the sanctions and the blocking of imports from of whether it's agriculture or textiles or cotton, and what's going on in Xinjiang is horrific, and the U.S. is the only one that's gotten brought a cost to that. Overall, he gets a very low rating on China because he left behind a mess for the Biden administration to clean up. And what did he really accomplish on trade? He got a deal that's very mercantilist that addresses none of the major problems, on all these huge numbers of things that China would buy. Everybody knew the numbers when the deal was done, that the numbers were nonsense, but they had to put them in as high numbers to make Trump happy so he could trumpet those numbers out. He left behind a mess, but he did leave behind a different conversation.
The perception of China and its role in the world has dramatically shifted over the past for years, as you alluded to in your first answer, across both major parties. Would you maybe, potentially, not to put words in your mouth, could you attribute this shift to things like the PRC's behavior, President Trump's rhetoric, policies, tweeting, external factors like COVID-19, or something else altogether?
I think it's all of the above, actually. I mean, China overreached. You know, they went too far in so many directions, whether it was claiming the South China Sea, building those islands, Mr. Xi telling Obama, while he was visiting Washington, that he would not militarize the islands, and then they get militarized. All of the different things that China has done that are more extreme, and also Trump, going after China so strongly and noisily. Also, I think changed perceptions a lot. I think it was just ready to happen. I think that the U.S. felt betrayed, actually, kind of betrayed and bamboozled about all of the goodwill they had put into helping China, opening our universities, opening our markets, scholarships, helping them build their legal system, getting them into WTO, on and on and on, and none of that goodwill was ever returned. And I think that created a lot of anger, in the United States and globally, with all the hacking and technology theft and forced tech transfer. The problem, China was very good at operating when it had an empty hand. They could negotiate from a position of weakness very well, but once they became strong, they've just overdone it. I think really what's happened is a lot of what we're seeing in front of us were things that were caused by China, its overreach. China, really, the real turning point was the global financial crisis, where China looked around and said, well, wait a second, our system works better. It showed that Wall Street was a mess. It showed that our system had huge weaknesses. They got through the Asian financial crisis and the global financial crisis just because they did not open up their financial system to the West and to the world's systems. And they started thinking, geez, our system is better. And that they also came to the conclusion that the U.S. and Europe also were both in inexorable decline, and that it was China's time. And then all the hubris of the multi-thousand-year civilization and came into play, and it's like they're getting their rightful place as a leader of the world. And then the behavior, the way they did it was they just started treating the outside world the same way they treat their own people. Tremble and obey, coming down very hard on people, trying to control the narrative of what can be said about them outside the country. I think they at first wanted to try to make the world safe for the Communist Party, that it's like, this is who we are, this is how we operate, just leave us alone and let us operate in the world. But then I think they realized that the best defense is a good offense. It's better to be feared than loved. If you can't be loved, you might as well be feared.
Does China consider how they're viewed by the rest of the world when they partake in actions of the South China Sea, the Taiwan, the Hong Kong, the Xinjiang technology transfer, the securities? Because it seems like they don't care what you all, if I'm them, think about us, if I'm them. They just seem to kind of not really pay it too much mind and aren't that worried about repercussions. I just don't understand how they could be doing so many things that the rest of the world isn't going to like, with almost a disregard to the impact or what might come their way.
Yeah, we always say that when China does some of these things, you go, why the hell can they do that? Don't they know how that looks to the world? But when's the last time anybody in Washington, D.C. said, oh, I wonder what the world will think about this? I mean, the U.S. operates in its own realm in kind of the same way. We're a superpower, so we kind of do what we want. We didn't ask the world. We didn't think about what will the world think when we invade Iraq, and other things. So I think it's kind of a superpower hubris.
I guess, and I think maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part. I remember when I used to live in China, I used to think, well, that can't be true, or that's not actually going to happen. I mean, if they want to be regarded, and I felt like their ego did in some ways want to be regarded as a great country in the world, that eventually you have to step up in environmental and climate and humanitarian and charitable aspects of the way that you exist and share this planet with the rest of the countries. And so I always thought that their goal was to be considered one of the greatest countries in the world. And to do that, you needed to kind of level up and maybe liberal up a little bit to join everyone else. I have not seen a lot of that happen.
Oh, I think that they consider themselves a great country, and it's up to us to realize that.
Yeah,
it's they operate in a very closed world. Look at every time a Chinese spokesman speaks to the outside world, they're really speaking to Zhongnanhai, to the Chinese Kremlin. It's not. It's all internal. It's all domestic. I had conversations with some senior Chinese officials late in 2019 in Beijing, and these were former cabinet ministers. And they were saying things like, look, we knew a fight was coming with the U.S. We knew that when we got big enough, they would not be able to handle the differences in our system. We're united. We're ready for this fight. We can handle it. You can't beat something with nothing. What's the U.S. got going for it? And countries and companies are just going to have to realize that we are who we are, and they're going to have to adjust to deal with us. These are the kind of things they were saying to me.
So that's the attitude and approach that we could potentially expect.
Well, look what's happened recently. I mean, we've had Yang Jiechi talking to the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, Wang Qishan talking to the board of U.S. Chamber, Wang Yi, I think he talked to Brookings, and their messages are all, we need to get a dialogue going again, but we have red lines. You can't go talk about Taiwan, Tibet, South China Sea, Xinjiang. And by the way, all of the problems between the U.S. and China were caused by you. Okay, now let's talk. I mean, that is the attitude of trying to get a dialogue going. It's been very frosty. You'll notice that Biden, after he talked to Xi Jinping, the White House readout was very strong. It was it looked like it was a very frosty meeting. But then you realize it went on for 2 hours. So I'm sure these guys weren't trading barbs for 2 hours. I think there is behind the scenes, they know that we got to figure something out. But remember, Biden's a talker. Hell, she might have listened for 2 hours.
Anne mentioned something where she said that we don't really get a chance to talk to or see any FaceTime or actual interviews with the people who really seem to run the country. We get a little bit fascinated, or at least mainstream media will get a little bit fascinated with those that are English educated, that are very articulate and well spoken in English, representing China. And we typically just default to talking to them a lot, but we don't actually get to talk to a lot of the people that make the decisions there. And therefore, we don't really know from their mouth what they're thinking or saying. Would you agree with that?
Oh, very, very much so. When's the last time anybody ever talked to Wang Huning or saw an interview with Wang Huning? Maybe 15, 20 years ago when he was a professor at Fudan University. He's a member of the standing committee, and he's basically the philosopher and political philosopher behind Xi and a lot of Xi's ideas. Yeah, I know you don't see anything from them. The Communist Party's always been that way. It's very, very secretive, very careful. Every statement is parsed. We used to be, in the 90s and into the 2000s, you could get a feeling for what was going on because they were more open. They were They were, China was in need in those days of the West. It was in need of investment, in need of business, in need of decent relations with foreign countries. So it had a peaceful atmosphere for its development. And it was more open. You could talk to people. Now it has just gone to top-down Leninism where, these people are scared. They're not going to say a damn thing to anybody.
Well, let's flip onto this side of the ocean then as well, and just let me ask, because you're very, very well connected in Washington as well, and I would expect that you might have a good finger on the pulse of whether we have a good idea of what actually happens in Washington. Maybe we can, throw Ottawa in there as well. But do we have more transparency, or is it a same game with a different rules and different actors? But do you feel that say we as citizens of the countries are a little more closer to the truth, have a little bit more transparency, or are we being misdirected and redirected in similar ways, just through different angles and positions?
No, not at all. I mean, our system is very transparent. Sure, it's not, maybe we don't get to know everything and there's a lot of spin in what you hear, but there's just so many channels. I mean, I actually sat down and read the hearing transcripts from the confirmation hearings for the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of Commerce, and Secretary of Treasury. And, you can read through that and you can get the idea of what these people are thinking. The good thing about the Biden administration, he's got a team of, when it comes to China, he's got a team of very experienced people. And many of them, who worked during the Obama administration, realized they screwed up. They realized that China kind of took them for a ride. It was kind of no drama Obama. He wanted climate change as his legacy, and he was trying to get us out of 2 wars. So he did not react quick enough or at all when China was building these islands in the South China Sea. Or on a lot of the trade and industrial stuff. Now, they have an excuse there because the business community was very afraid of China and not encouraging them to push back in those days because they didn't want to lose the market share they had. But then there was a tipping point where the business community finally gave up. But no, I think I'm very impressed by the China team they've got, and they're scattered throughout, right? They got good people in defense and National Security Council, USTR, commerce. It's I'm really looking forward to them putting together an intelligent China policy, which would be a nice thing. Between Pompeo having shit fits and Navarro just, being in loony land, it'll be nice to see some strategic thinking.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. And I'm glad. So first of all, thank you for the commentary on, how much we know and can trust what we seem to know and hear and understand of what our government is doing. So that's good to hear. I have always assumed it, but I don't think it's ever been so forefront on my conscience to actually ask somebody who might know what their opinion would be as well. And I thought that it was that way. I thought being in China, it seemed like everything was shrouded in mystery, whereas here it was open. I said, well, maybe it's the same game, just a different way, but it's not the same game.
No, remember, we got a press corps. We have a very aggressive press corps that is, unearthing whatever really goes on. They eventually are able to dig it up.
It's really good to hear that the Biden administration is reinvesting in those who were previously there. And even though they may not have done a great job at the time during Obama, but doubling down, saying, you made some mistakes, you've got that experience now, we're going to reinvest and maybe capitalize on that education and put you back in there and see what you can do a second time around now that you're, it's not your first tour of duty.
And they've all moved into higher office. They've all moved up quite a few notches.
So then let me ask you at a high level, what can we expect the U.S.-China relations to look like under President Biden?
I think it's going to be smarter, but it's going to be it's going to be very rocky because China does not seem to be like it's willing to bend in any direction. It's got its narrative and they're going to stick to it. Biden will be much stronger on human rights. Trump wasn't strong on human rights. I mean, if you read Bolton's book, he even talks about Trump endorsing the camps in Xinjiang when he had a private conversation with Xi, saying he thought it was a good idea. Biden's got a very strong human rights record, and trade is going to be very interesting to watch because the U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai is she's Taiwanese American, but has Mandarin. She used to be an enforcement attorney at USTR, and then she's been on the Ways and Means Committee staff, doing a lot of heading up the trade work. She knows what she's doing, and Biden's trade policy is about creating jobs in the United States. One of the things the U.S. government has been focusing on in our negotiations with China is getting our financial services firms into China and getting big pharma into China. And even Larry Summers said recently, when I think he said when Goldman Sachs gets into China, it doesn't create any jobs in the U.S. Biden's going to be about U.S. employment, U.S. jobs, and that's a good thing. And it's going to really be the focus of where trade goes, and that's a whole different orientation than trying to create, the best thing you can for multinationals that is not going to bring any dividends at home.
Okay, well, I was going to ask, do you think President Biden's top priorities will be? But I think you answered that with humanitarian and trade. So let me just ask on some of the other topics like technology and security. Do you think that that's going to be important? Do we have good people in place to also take up those issues as well?
Yes, we do. But, it's going to be really, really interesting to watch and very difficult. Just the last 2 days, here's a real juxtaposition. About a couple of days ago, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce came out with a very thorough report on, U.S. decoupling from China. And they point out the damages that could happen if we push too far. Actually, I have a couple numbers in front of me. If the 25% tariffs are expanded to cover all U.S. trade, U.S.-China trade, we'd lose $190 billion in annual trade. On the top industries, remember the most advanced American industries have the best market share in China because China can't do it yet. Aviation, Boeing and aviation services. If we lost the China market, we would be losing about somewhere between $40 and $50 billion a year and over 200,000 jobs in the United States. On chips and semiconductors, if they lost access to Chinese customers, it would cost somewhere between, they got between 54 billion, 124 billion. That's quite a range in lost output. Medical devices, similar. They're showing the numbers on, if the chip companies can't sell into China, which is their biggest and fastest growing market, if they can't, then the Koreans and the Japanese will, and they'll take over the market, and then they'll basically take over global leadership. So it's a complicated thing. At the same time, Tom Cotton came out with a report, I think yesterday, that we should do complete decoupling. There's a scenario where Tom Cotton is a strong presidential candidate in 4 years. Now, this is what's so difficult about all of this, because we need to work with our allies, and Biden's team is always talking about, if we work with the developed capitalist democracies, we have 60% of global GDP. If we work together with them on China, China's going to have to pay attention. But, as you've seen with the Europeans signing a trade agreement at the end of last year, despite Biden's people reaching out and saying, hold on a second, wait till we can talk to you. I think they want to work with the United States, but they also think our system is really broken. Look at this. I mean, we got Biden now, but that doesn't mean we can't have somebody who's smarter and but just as damaging as Trump next time around, because our system is still broken. It's still broken with people like Fox News and social media that put out just enormously damaging misinformation, all to make a buck. Our campaign finance, where billionaires can basically have a candidate of their own. They know that our system is pretty broken, and it was shown in Technicolor when the attack on the Capitol, just not very long ago. So there's so many complications facing Biden in being successful.
Last question. Besides both heads of state, which actors on either side of the ocean here for the next 4 years do you predict are going to be the most significant players in this next season of U.S.-China relationship?
It's going to be the leaders of the business community. It's going to be, people like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the AmChams, investment bankers, the influential business community on what they're willing to do, because globalization removed American companies' allegiance to America, and I don't say it in the patriotic way, but if you are running a multinational and most of your business is outside of the U.S., and in fact, maybe most of your business is in China, and it's your fastest growing market, Xi Jinping is more important to you than Joe Biden. They don't have KPIs to do something for America. Their KPIs are to make money. Something has to be done on that regard, and bringing them in caring more, in having incentives to help the country. And I'm not trashing them as being unpatriotic. I'm just talking about the way our system works as opposed to China, because there's not a noodle stand in China that isn't going to have allegiance for their government when they have to. And then also the national security establishment, the military, the intelligence agencies, and the technologists. I mean, it's going to be all about technology and the technology companies, and how we sort that out, how much technology gets bifurcated or blended.
Jim, thanks again for coming on the show. We really, really appreciate it. I really look forward to this kind of back-to-back series with you and Anne Stephenson Yang talking about the last 4 years and the next 4 years. Hope to be able to come back and talk to you again real soon.
Well, this is fun. I can't wait to hear Anne's interview. Anne is a 25, 30-year friend of mine, and who I haven't talked to in a while. So I got a lot of respect for her.
Growing a company is hard. Doing it in a foreign market? Exponentially so. The best piece of advice I can give you is not to do it alone. When you start looking across the pond for further expansion possibilities, and I sincerely hope that you do, make sure you choose the right partners to do it with. My good friends at WPIC Marketing and Technologies have almost 20 years of experience helping brands just like yours enter China. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Negotiation, and if you're interested in being a guest or want to connect with me or any of our team, please reach out to us at podcast@wpic.co. And be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. 再见.